Welcome, y'all. This is the Beer Guys Radio Show. We are happy to be here, and we are happy to have you with us. We're in the field this week. We're at the Atlanta Cask Ale tasting. The Owen Ogletree is with us, the organizer, founder of the festival. Owen, what year is this for ACAT?
18.
18.
It would be 19, but we had to take a year off for that pesky
little global
COVID.
pandemic, the plague, when the plague set on us. Yeah. We thank you for tuning in. I am Tim Dennis. I'm here with my co-host Brian Hewitt.
Hey Tim, how you doing?
Good, man, good. And the notorious Mo Mike Nate with a mic.
With a microphone.
Yeah, man.
Glad to be here.
Good. And as we mentioned, we have Owen Ogletree here with us. Owen, we appreciate you having us out here every year. Great events. We always have a good time. This is one of those festivals that a lot of the brewers are here. So if you want to talk to the brewers, and they get to do fun things that aren't their normal tap beers.
Right.
So a little bit of creativity in that. So, we were talking, and this isn't really relevant directly to Cask Ale. It could be related. But before we came on the air, we were talking about how people will say things like lager and pilsner. They'll say ale and stout or things like that. The lager and pilsner phrase tweaks me a little bit. I'm sensitive there because a pilsner is a type of lager, and I don't see the purpose in saying lager and pilsner. But historically, like the phrase ale and stout, or stout, ale and beer, stout and beer, there are differentiators there. Is that correct?
Yes, definitely. The overarching terminology is beer. And then under that, you've got lagers and you have ales. And lagers are typically fermented cold. Well, the yeast hangs out at the bottom of the barrel. It's very slow. It's very deliberate. It's very chilled out. It produces very few, fruity flavors. We call those esters. It produces a very clean beer. Ales, on the other hand, are the exact opposite. They like to be fermented warm. They hang out at the top of the fermenter. They're hyperactive. They produce all kinds of crazy fruity esters, spicy flavors. So ales are typically more complex than the lagers. But lagers are beautiful because they're so simple and clean, and you can have dark lagers, high-gravity lagers, session lagers, golden lagers. They're all over the place. But when you have someone say, hey, what's the difference between a pilsner and a lager? It's not a good question because it's like saying, what's the difference between a truck and a Ford F-150? The F-150 is just a type of truck. Yeah, right.
But what about I think probably kind of early 1900s, I've seen old advertising, I think generally European, English, that will say ale and stout or maybe ale and beer. I think I've seen that as well.
That's not good either.
Okay, that's all right. Then I'm not crazy. Okay.
Because a stout is an ale. So if you see an old banner in England that says ales, stouts, and porters, what they were trying to do is say we've got bitters, and we've got stouts, and we've got porters, because people didn't know. They just used the word ale for a nice amber-colored beer. Okay. But people also love their stouts and their porters, so you wanted to have that up on the pub marquee as well.
So in that time frame, an ale would have been kind of a generic term for that style, that this is like you said, a mild or something there in the pub.
Stouts and porters are ales, and pilsners, Doppelbock, Schwarzbiers, Munich, Helles, that's all lagers.
Okay. Yeah. There we go. I know there was some terminology that liked to play around there.
I think it's all in just like changing definitions that the populace uses. Like when people say lager and pilsner, I know what they mean. They mean American light lager and pilsner. So they're really talking about.
Do they, though?
I think they do.
Okay.
I think they generally mean light lager, like mass market light lager, and then they mean pilsner.
Not a good thing.
Yeah. Well, that's because, Brian, to that point, we do have a lot of breweries that have just put out a beer and called it lager. So-and-so, Joey Brewing's lager beer, Joey Brewing's light lager, or whatever, So, and I think we do understand, kind of what they're saying when they say that.
A similar vein is this is the first Cask Ale Festival we've ever had that didn't have a sour beer, a kettle sour. Where you throw lactobacillus bacteria in the kettle before you go to bed that night, and we come back in the morning and the beer's all sour, and then you crank it up and boil it to kill all those bacteria. That's what most people think of as a sour, but sour is not a term. It's like
it's a taste.
It's meaningless. It's like saying, ales. There's just a multitude of sour beers. There's a multitude of ales. In sour beers, you've got Goza, you've got Lambic, you've got all kinds of Belgian red ales, farmhouse ales. So I had one guy when I posted the beer list for this, which is a phenomenal beer list. He said, "No kettle sours. I'm out." And I'm like, well, first of all, sour is not a good terminology for beer. It's very vague. So,
well, that's it. In talking to brewers about that, especially the brewers that do like the wild or mixed fermentation type of beers, they'll get real passionate on that with you. And I know that there's some brewers that do a quote-unquote kettle sour type beer where all they do is add some lactic acid just to drop pH. They don't even do the lactobacillus step.
Very two-dimensional. But if you have a barrel sour that sits for a year with all these different microbes in it souring, and not really souring, but the acidity is going up along with other complex flavors, that is a miraculous beer. But these things that they just sour overnight, I'm kind of over it.
Throw me some fruit in there. I'll party with that too, Owen. Man, put me some fruit in there, and I'm good to go. So.
I don't think the Cask is the right delivery vehicle for those types of beers. They were designed. They're a fairly new thing. They're meant for like higher carbonation levels. They're not meant for colder temperatures, higher carbonation. They're meant for what we think of as beer in America right now. They're not traditional cask ale. They're not geared towards real ale. I don't think, but maybe I'm wrong with that.
A fresh low gravity beer going into a cask and getting served very quickly is very traditional. English miles, English bitters. I think a lot of the sour ales also fall in that category. Something that's 4% ABV and got a pH of 3 or so. You put it in a cask. It's great. It's fine.
Yeah. So we're talking ales and lagers and stouts and porters and all that, and we're here at the Atlanta Cask Ale tasting. Do they do cask lagers?
Oh yeah, we've got like 7 or 8 lagers here. Yeah,
okay. I hadn't looked at the list all the way.
They're very good.
So.
There was an article I was reading through, and I did not finish it just last night, making the case for cask lagers being a new thing.
I read that
because it's not really something you typically think about. You think cask ale, real ale. Right. It's ale. It's not lager typically. And I guess there's a movement that's pushing for. I mean, what's the advantage to putting a lager in cask?
Well, they do it in Germany all the time. You go to Munich, and they pull a little pitch line, plastic line, giant barrel, just for sanitation reasons, and they fill it with a young, unfiltered lager, and they let it sit in the cooler for 2 or 3 days, and they drag it out, throw it up on the bar, hammer a tap into it, much like cask ale. And it is fantastic because it is unfiltered, super fresh, no oxidation. You're getting a soft carbonation, so you can taste the malt and the hops, and not a mouthful of foam. Yeah, I think they're great. So I love cask lagers.
I was asking about cask lagers and totally forgetting that I've had them several times at Oktoberfest events and stuff. Tapping a fresh, fresh cask
those
there.
Are casks.
Yeah.
The only difference is there's carbonated beer going in the German cask. The carbonated lager goes in there. They seal it up. It has about half the carbonation of the draft version. Throw it up on the bar. Use a gravity tap to serve it. The carbonation is soft, smooth, beautiful, whereas cask ale goes in flat. And with a little bit of yeast sediment, a little bit of residual sugar, and the whole carbonation happens in the cask when the yeast starts to release the carbon dioxide.
And it's all about timing with the cask ale. You want it in there the right amount of time so you still have fresh beer, but you have your light carbonation, right?
Right.
Okay. Well, Owen, to back up a little bit here, we always do this at this show for those that may be just tuning in to us for the first time, or potentially they just haven't experienced cask ale. What is cask ale, and what sets that apart from what I'm just going to call typical American beers?
Oh, it's night and day. American beer, you take filtered, pasteurized beer, you put it into a cask with a bunch of artificial carbon dioxide forced into it. Sorry, you put it into a keg. So that's kegged beer. Keg beer is easy. You buy it, you roll it under the bar, you hook a coupler to it, you set your CO2 level, and you flip a tap on the bar, and it comes right out because of the pressure, and you've got this really carbonated, heavy, pasteurized, clear beer that comes out of there, unless it's a hazy IPA. Cask Cask beer is totally different. There's no artificial gas, like I said before. You put flat beer into the cask, a little bit of residual sugar, a little bit of you got to have some living yeast in there. It can't be filtered. It can't be pasteurized. The beer just naturally carbonates in the cask because there's a little sugar, a little yeast left. And so what you're drinking is like something that you would get in England in the 1800s. They didn't have artificial carbon dioxide gas. They didn't have a way to force carbon dioxide into a beer to make it really fizzy. And they just used this cask method. So in England, it is this just long surviving tradition that's been going on for hundreds of years. And it's really the last place in the world, except for a few spots in America, where you can get a true, softly carbonated, beautiful, natural cask ale.
And that's, to that note, if you know what the English call real ale, we do have a little variation. As Americans, we always get a little crazy. There are some things here at the Cask Ale tasting that wouldn't fall into that like real ale category. I'm drinking one right now from Monday Night Brewing. Hey, what's the name, Brian, the official name for this one?
Chocolate pecan pie.
Yeah. You're not going to find that in your English corner pub, right? Right, Owen?
Well, 10 years ago you wouldn't.
Oh,
these days you go to
Maybe.
pubs now and you're seeing peanut butter, hazy, fruit, sour. They're all on casks, so it's all real ale.
See?
Even that Monday night is a real ale.
Look at that. Look
Yeah.
at that. So I enjoy it, and I know there's been some purists. There's I'm going to say infamous social media guy that just throws a fit about it. I'm not going to say his name and give him credit, but I know folks know him. But he's very verbal about not liking the fact that there's very non-traditional beers here. But Owen, having been to festivals over this is one of the busiest events I've seen since the plague. So it's good to see people out enjoying festivals again like this. And festivals are struggling. We've heard that.
Festivals are really struggling.
Yeah.
One just got canceled that was coming up in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But this is special, and people know this is special because you can't get these beers anywhere else in the world. And my friend says that's the greatest thing about this and the worst thing about it.
Yeah.
Because you're having all these great exclusive beers that you never can get anywhere else, but you can't ever get them anywhere else anymore. So it's heartbreaking.
I'll say, Owen, for me, that's one of the draws here because I've gotten to the point with commercial beer. Brian, you and I used to literally chase delivery trucks around the liquor stores to get one bottle of this, 2 bottles of that. But it's gotten to the point on the shelf that there's so many good beers, whether it's Georgia or distribution, there's a good chance if I want a beer of a certain style, I can either get it in my neighborhood or a short drive around Atlanta.
Yeah.
So the need to chase like that isn't as much. But these beers, you're not going to find something on the shelf that compares to a lot of these.
No.
So if you want something unique and new and different and that you're not going to see on the shelf, and you want, what do we have here? 53 today, did I see, Owen?
Yeah,
53.
53 beers that, there's a couple that are cask takes on some commercial offerings.
There's quite a few, yeah.
Nice, unique styles of beer.
But even if you take like 3 taverns, puts their night on punts in a cask with a little handful of dry hops, that is a special beer. It's not going to taste like regular night on punts. It's going to have a softer flavor. It's going to have more fruity flavors from the yeast acting in the cask. It's going to have a different nuance from the dry hops put in there. So even if there's not much difference done to it, which is okay by me because I'm kind of a purist as well, it's a totally different beer, and it's worth trying.
Is adding the dry hops to the cask, is that considered traditional?
Oh yeah,
okay.
Very much. Yeah.
Is it just hops, or throughout history have people throwing cocoa nibs in there and other things like that, like we would see perhaps happen here? Or is it just typically hops?
Normally in England, you're just going to see dry hops. You might see an addition of like some molasses to a cask to help it carbonate. You might see some elderberries thrown in, a handful, some other fruits. But in England, traditionally, it was just dry hops. And in England, they have whole leaf hop plugs that are shaped exactly like the big bung on the cask, where you can just drop a plug in and seal it up, and there's no worry. You don't have to worry about it. It just
set it and forget it, Brian.
Dissipates, settles out. Yeah. Yep. But now in England, like I said, you're seeing crazy stuff on cask. which I don't know how I feel about it.
Yeah,
everything that Americans do, English people have a tendency to follow it 3 or 4 years later. So
that's what I've heard. We talked to some brewers in other countries, some in South America and Ireland, and they were saying, "Hey, we're doing what America was, 3 to 5 years ago."
Yeah, right.
But I think that starts the innovation. America, we copied what we knew from European brewers. It took us a good 100 and some years before we kind of became our own thing.
Yeah.
So seeing that America has the innovation in that, and other countries kind of following that starts their innovation. I actually saw recently, I believe it was in China, that because they were doing the same thing. A lot of their craft breweries followed American styles. And they had gotten to the point where they were changing to appeal to the local palates. They were using the fruits and the taste and all the things for the locals. So that's how it works, man. Brian, that is how the magic works.
You
right
start
there.
off with something that's very popular in another place, and then you dial it into the local palate.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So have you had anybody, you've got a lot of brewers here, they're tasting a lot of things, and they get to see what it's like. Does anybody leave here and say, you know what, I need to put a beer engine up in my tap room, or I need to start putting casks up? Does that ever happen, or is it pretty much like this was fun once and now I'm done with it?
I've had 4 or 5 people who say they're big homebrewers, and they will buy a cask after this, go home, get a beer engine or get a gravity tap, and start making cask ale at home. It's better. It's easier than making 2 cases of bottles and having to sanitize all those bottles.
Yeah.
You've got one little 5.5 gallon cask or a 10.5 gallon firkin, and you just sanitize it, put it in there. But the problem is there is no gas going, no carbon dioxide going in to replace the beer that's coming out. You've got air going in, which has oxygen. So in a cask, you've got to drink it pretty fast.
How long do you have, typically?
It depends on the alcohol content, but a 6% alcohol cask ale, if you drink a third of it one day, you're going to come back tomorrow, and the next third's going to be a little different and okay and very good. And the next day, with the last third, it's going to probably be drinkable, but, that's pretty much it.
You've got about 3. So when you tap a fresh cask, you want to enjoy it, you do it within about 3 days.
3 days, yeah.
Okay. Is there, at most.
Right.
So,
is there a compromise spot where you could actually pump in CO2 without adding pressure, just enough to replace? Is that ever done? Is that possible?
You can buy what's called a cask breather. So instead of just making a hole in the cask to fill the cask with air when you draw off a pint, you've got a nozzle that goes in the hole, and you set it to a very low level of carbon dioxide, like a 0.5 pound of pressure. And when you pull the pint off, you're replacing that with a pint of carbon dioxide, which does not oxidize your beer, and carbon dioxide is sterile, so it's not going to put bacteria in your beer to sour it. And if you use a cask breather, which are pretty pricey, not so bad, you can make a cask go for 10 days.
Okay. I mean, that's still a significant improvement, but you still have 10 days to go through your 5 gallons.
Right.
So
Brian would do that just as an excuse to drink a cask. And he's like, it's going to go bad. I've got to do it.
I got to drink a third
The
of this
milk's
cask.
expiring. The beer's expiring.
These donuts are going off. I've got to eat all of them.
That's
Yes.
right. So,
and anybody who comes to Atlanta can go to Decatur and go to Brickstore Pub. I helped them design their cask bar up there, which is a beautiful place. It looks like you just stepped into England. And they've got 4 casks back there at 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which is perfect to get all the flavors. And they have a cask breather on each one. So their cask can last for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days, 9 days. But the beauty of the brick store is they don't have to really worry about that, because the cask they put on, they go in a day or two. They're so popular.
Well, a great example there. So I'm not sold on cask ale. I enjoy it. I still like, my traditional carbonation. Brian is a big fan.
I am.
And we've been making predictions, and Brian's on board team cask ale. This is the year for cask ale. People are going to get more on board with that.
I hope so.
And definitely places like Brickstore and what they serve are good cheerleaders.
A bellwether.
So, a couple of examples for those that have had like Sierra Nevada Pale Ale or Sierra Nevada Celebration.
Oh, yeah.
Those are beers that they got on cask. It's a different experience,
Totally.
The flavor's more vibrant, just the feel, the flavor, everything. And that's something, like I said, not necessarily my preference, but phenomenal. They were good. And if that's something that does suit your fancy, it would be a great way to see the difference that you get with a true cask ale compared to a traditionally carbonated can. Or I guess traditionally carbonated may not be the
It's
the right
striking
way.
how good they are, and it's you can have a beer that you've had before. Like I like to talk about Monday Night's Draft to Kill. They did a cask of that, and that was mind-blowingly good on cask. I thought it was a good beer, fine. You know, it's won awards, but on cask, it's a whole nother level.
Yeah,
beer.
I agree.
It's
I had that, and it was
extremely
fantastic.
impressive, and I always go in hoping to see it there. And sadly, it's never there. I do like the fact that I don't know if it's still as exclusive as it used to be, but the Sierra Nevada casks, I think the brick store, that was the only place in the country that you could actually have, maybe it was Celebration on cask, other than maybe at the brewery itself.
Yeah.
Which was crazy.
They got connections. Those guys are connected.
Yeah.
They do some special stuff there.
I've had the Sierra Nevada Pale Ale on cask at the brewery in Mills River, and I told the brick store guys, you need to reach out and see if they can do some for you if you contract for a certain amount, and they came through for them. They won't do that for anybody, but the brick store is special, and oh my God, it is so good. And they sent them some casks of Celebration Ale for Christmas. Unbelievably good.
Good stuff.
I want to say there was other Christmas beers on when I was last there. I don't recall what they were, but it was striking how good they were as well.
Yeah.
So I'm in love with it. I've been on board with it ever since the ACAT that we talked about. You talked about pouring your beer hard down the center of the glass to achieve a cask-like feel, and I started experimenting with that because that's a whole new way of drinking beer. And I'm like, there's something here. There's something to this. So up until that point, the ACAT was always about, well, what kind of flavorings do they put in these little barrels? You know?
Yeah. Which to me is not the important thing. The important thing to me is the beautiful character of cask ale, like you were saying, the softer carbonation where you can taste the malt and the hops, and just the softness and the amount of flavor you get from a cask ale is just brilliant.
And the aromatics getting released by all that extra beer.
Right.
Something I read about that it didn't even occur to me, but the lacing in your glass is actually additional aroma, which means additional flavor. I always swirl my glass and was like washing it off the side, and now I'm leaving it up there, and I'm like, I think it does contribute to the aroma and flavor of the beer as you're drinking. Leave it be.
True.
You know, there was just a big debate on Twitter, and not just Twitter. This is going around for a lot, but people hating beer foam. Like they want to get, if you go to a bar and you get a pint of beer, that better be beer to the top of it.
The boss pour.
Yeah, and people are. The thing is Brian, I forget where it was. Actually, I think it was an English pub in Avondale Estates. Where we got a beer, and they poured it so slowly, none of the carbonation came out of it. And the beer tasted dead.
Yeah.
I'm not going to use the word flat, but the flavor was flat. But I asked them for another glass, and I poured the beer back and forth, and it was like getting a different beer.
And you built the foam up.
Yeah. So it's like beer foam isn't a bad thing. You know, you don't want a beer poured so much that it stays in there. For one, it's not going to express the flavor the way you want it. And another, that gas, you can see videos of this out there, but that carbonation is going to open in your stomach. So you're going to take a drink, you're going to feel mighty gassy. And I don't need any help being gassy, Brian.
Life hack. If they give you those kind of pours with no carbonation, order one and get 2 glasses, and you have 2 beers.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's magic.
I'm known at several places for 1 Owen, 2 cups.
1 Owen, 2 cups.
I always have to order 2. I get a
Yeah.
beer and they give me another cup.
Don't Google that.
No, don't do that. But the carbonation is beautiful to drink through because in the carbonation they had on the beer, you get a lot of hop oils, a lot of esters accumulate in that carbonation. And as you're drinking through that, and it's not going in your stomach and exploding in your stomach, but it's exploding in your glass, it just makes the beer so much more flavorful and aromatic.
Beer's so great, y'all. It's good
It
stuff.
really is.
And we do want to throw out real quick, Owen, that this event, it's a charity event. It benefits Atlanta Humane Society, correct?
Wonderful people, good friends of mine, yeah.
Always nice. Drinking beer for a good cause. That is definitely it. Owen, anything else you want folks to know or pay attention to out there?
I can't. We pretty much covered it very well.
We talked a good old cask ale. So
I do have to ask, what have been some of your favorites that you've had today?
I knew you were going to ask that.
Yeah.
The tough questions. Yeah.
I can't. It's like picking out your favorite children here. It's just so difficult. Mitch Steele, New Realms, experimental, strong mild was great. We got a special cask from Blue Jacket Brewery in Washington, D.C. That's another experimental English mild that was like shipped around the world. So it's extra hopped, extra alcohol.
And was that considered a collaboration with Ron Pattinson? Did I see that correctly?
I think so, yeah. It is just to die for. Neil Engelman at Three Taverns made a clone of Old Speckled Hen with a little bit lighter alcohol. Not Old Speckled Hen, I'm sorry. Old Peculiar, which is one of my favorite English beers. A little bit lighter in alcohol. It is brilliant. Phil Farrell's Imperial Doppelbock, which is a lager.
Santa Claus reference there,
He
right?
brews it every Christmas, and it lagers for a year. It is amazing. Todd at Good Word in Duluth has a bitter here that everyone is dying about. It's so good. There's just too many to talk about.
There is. You've named some of the ones I really enjoyed. Also, Mazurt had one. Brian, the name on that's a long name. So Mazurt did.
Yeah.
It is rum barrel aged, unfocused reflections of matter, Elders Edition.
Right.
And
the Elders is our little beer group here. Everybody over 50 years old. So
I was mildly offended when I got invited to the group, Owen. I'm like, all right, Tim, don't take this personal. So, but no, you know what? It's a good group of older fellas that go around enjoying good beer. So,
and we got women in there in their 30s, and they love being part of the beer Elders. So it's fun.
Hang on.
Y'all do cool stuff like travel to European countries and South Africa and Italy and all that stuff.
New
right?
Zealand.
So, yeah.
Is Mo Mike Nate going to get an invite before I do? I'm not 50 yet, but if there are people in their 30s already in part of this group, I mean, what's going on?
I'm not a lady in my 30s though.
Wow, that's true. That's true. You know what?
Well, we don't have any proof of that, Nate. I'm just saying.
That's true.
But no, you know what? You see those fellas out at every event. I've seen several of them around here, but you go out, they're just out. Retired guys enjoying, or a lot of them are retired fellas.
Oh yeah,
enjoying their.
I've seen a few of them here. Today.
Absolutely,
like every one of these, you see a bunch
that,
of them.
But that was a good one. That was a great beer. So, Owen, always we enjoy this festival a lot. We appreciate you chatting with us, educating.
Thank you very much.
Spreading the word there. So, y'all, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more in just a minute. See you soon. Welcome back, y'all. We're still at the Atlanta Cask Ale Tasting, having a good time. But we are now here with Joseph Cortez, Executive Director of the Georgia Craft Brewers Guild. And Joseph, we've covered this year, we talked a lot about New Jersey law. There's a lot going on there. But we're fighting the fight here in Georgia as well, correct?
We are fighting the fight.
Yeah. What are the big issues? There's a bill up, I should say that. There is a beer bill up right now, correct?
There's a beer bill. The Foam Act is what we're calling it.
Yes.
It's our little cute name for it. Fair and open access to market.
Good deal.
Which is really the biggest single issue for most of our small brewers is their ability to get to consumers.
And what does the Foam Act, what is it presenting? What are we trying to change here right now?
Yeah, the Foam Act does a few things. I will stick with the two top ones because, that's just time and kind of priority here. Gotcha. It allows for self-distribution for small brewers, and we have some limits in there, right? It has some production limits. It has some area limits, and we're willing to talk to folks who want to talk to us about, other parameters there. But the idea is to support our small brewers to be able to get out to market. And, the traditional distribution model for very small business models, really new business models in the 21st century that opened up, especially in Georgia after Senate Bill 85 in 2017. New consumer model, just a whole new demand, and the traditional 30% markup when you're out the door as a small brewery to get across the street to the pizza shop doesn't work for many of our folks. So we need a new model in Georgia, and so that helps them get limited amounts, direct to some retailers, probably in their own neighborhood, in their own area, which we know there's a demand for. We hear from I hear from brewers and brewery owners pretty regularly that they can't even get product out because they can't get a call back from a distributor. And when they do, they can't get across the street to the pizza shop or the whatever restaurant that wants to carry their product because they can't get it into distribution to get it there. Or it's got to go across the state, sit in a warehouse shelf, get 30% markup, and then go back across the street, which is just not economically feasible for most of these small business models.
One of the extreme cases I heard of that. So our friends at Terrapin Brewery Atlanta at Truist Park they have a partnership with Fox Brothers Barbecue.
Right.
But when they opened under the Georgia beer laws, a brewery could not also have a restaurant. So they are technically two separate businesses. There's Fox Brothers Barbecue and Terrapin Brewery Atlanta. And although they are essentially connected buildings, you cannot enter the Terrapin Brewery through Fox Brothers. You have to take an elevator up and go back around. There is a separation of the two businesses. And they still have to go through a distributor to be on the taps in Fox Brothers, which they're physically connected to. And they have to go, the distributor comes to Terrapin, picks up kegs, takes them to their warehouse, checks them in, then drives them back, and literally, depending on when they drop the kegs, we're literally saying they could be a foot from where they were produced. Correct?
Sure. Yeah. I'd have to go back and look at, the devil's in the details.
Yes.
And the details, if we start getting something rolling, the details are going to be hashed out even more than they probably are even in the current bill.
Right.
But, that's a unique situation. I mean, I know that there's a retail license there at the Battery that also has alcohol and liquor. So that complicates us a little bit more. Because, we do have breweries now with restaurants that aren't necessarily brew pub licensed, not to get into the complicated Georgia beer license 101, because it's crazy in Georgia.
Yeah.
We think that folks should be able to have flexibility to do what they need to succeed and to thrive. Right. And that's what this is about. So that's self-distribution. The second big thing is franchise law reform. Currently in Georgia, there is the most stringent franchise law that really favors the distributor in that relationship. They're the only party in this two-party relationship that can have a voluntary release of the other party, meaning the small brewer or the brewer at all. But in our case, really mostly small businesses, small brewers. There's these other few complicated ways that they can get out that would typically drain a small business like a small brewery if they want to try and go down those avenues, showing cause, going before the Department of Revenue, this lengthy, expensive legal process. Otherwise, they can be voluntarily released from the distributor. It's up to the distributor. There's no voluntary release from that relationship from our brewers who are small business. So there's a clear disparity there. And, we believe with some meaningful but reasonable reforms there, we can give a little bit more leverage to our small breweries. You still have to go through a process. This is still, there's still all the legal mechanisms that would protect both parties. But again, give these folks a fighting chance to have more control over their own product that they have built and brewed and invested in and hired for.
Yeah, and I know, Joseph, due to the position you're in, you have to be polite to all parties and make sure you're not looking to make enemies when you're trying to negotiate something. And the wholesalers, this is the other side of that. In the Georgia, there's a 3-tier system.
Correct.
Like a lot of places, you have retailers, wholesalers, and manufacturers, and you don't cross the streams, so to speak. And from the wholesaler's perspective, they want to keep their control on the distribution of beer. But some of the challenges there, like you said, and I've had friends who've started small breweries, and they will say, I just can't get a distributor that wants to take me.
Absolutely.
I'm too small. It doesn't make sense for them to do that. These are the cases you're talking about. The little brewery, just like you said, that wants to get a beer to the pizza joint across the street. The little guy who's starting off, one particular case, it was a contract brewer, and he's doing really small batches, and the distributors are just like, it's just not worth it for us to do this without some guarantees. So it's not like you're trying to take any of the rights away, because a lot of these breweries still very highly value their relationships with their distribution partners to get beer out more places. But it's going to be good for the brewers as well as the distributors. We're going to be able to do things here with these small breweries that it would not benefit a distributor to be involved with, even though, they may need to be. And there's talking about the franchise reform. I remember the Clown Shoes situation in Georgia a few years back. The distributor decided they didn't want to do beer anymore. And Clown Shoes was essentially like, okay, we'll just release this so we can get another distributor. And they're like, no. And there was really no recourse for Clown Shoes there. If they didn't want to distribute their beer, they didn't have to, but they also didn't have to release them to go to another distributor. Now, I do believe after some internet
uproar,
they did release them there, but by law they wouldn't have had to do that. Little changes there, not looking to hurt anybody else or take anything away from anybody else. But like you said, these brewers they're putting their blood, sweat, and tears into making these beers and relieving the system a little bit for these small people to be players. Sure. And not have to go to a brewer for a very small run of beer, or a distributor that doesn't want to mess with a small batch of beer.
Now, you said there were limitations on this self-distribution. Are there specific figures in place now in this bill, or is it negotiation, or what can you tell us about the limitations, if you know them off the top of your head?
I believe we have up to 3,000 barrels per brewery.
Okay.
You can self-distribute. I believe that's the limit. For example, in North Carolina, it's up to 50,000 barrels. Wow. And they have a thriving system of small breweries that really is a huge has been an economic boom to their state and to their tourism. So we're right now asking for up to 3,000 barrels. I think we have some other things that say, if you're larger than a certain percentage of your wholesaler's portfolio, to again throw kind of a nugget out there and say, all right, we're not trying to hurt the bottom line of another player here. We're just trying to give more opportunity and more flexibility, which is what we're supposed to be about in this state for small businesses. And it is a great state to do business in. There's no doubt, right? We just want to really give our small brewers opportunity. So yeah, there's a few of those controls. There's right now there's a radius, which I'm sure could be narrowed. It's probably a little bit larger of a radius, but whether the radius is statewide or 1 mile or 10 miles, the model for self-distribution that has been proven in other states is that it's going to be people who it makes sense, again, for them and their scale to scale up to actually get out locally and to build their brand. In very few states, North Carolina, Colorado, which have significant self-distribution, you don't really see, by and large, of course there's some one-offs, you don't see by and large brewery businesses getting into the real actual wholesale distribution, massive network of trucks. There's been a couple, and some of those have actually reverted. Because they just,
Right. They're not logistics companies, they're breweries.
Yeah.
Right. They don't want to, and I was going to mention, I figured that was the case. If the laws were loosened, there may be some that choose to just do all of their own distribution. But for the most part, these small breweries that you're talking about are going to deliver within 1 mile, 5 miles, 10 miles, whatever it is. If they do well in that 5 mile radius and they're like, hey, we're growing, people like our beer, and they want to go out from that, then that is a proven commodity for a distribution partnership. If they get to the point where they need to do that, it's like, look, we've been doing this and we're doing well enough, we need to step into here. It's not like you're taking on an unknown entity that's doing tiny numbers of barrels a year. Hey, we've established we're coming to you because people want this, and we're stretching out from there. So what can we do as consumers? That's a big part. That's, Joseph, I'm active on some internet forums for beer and that. Talk to the beer drinkers a lot. They all want more info. They want to know. They want to be involved. What is the way they can do it? What should the consumer know? And what should they know? And why is this going to make a difference for them?
Well, it's going to make a difference for them because more choice means simply that there are more options. More options for consumers are great. We know that consumers, especially y'all know better than anyone in the craft space, want those choices, want local. And some of that's changing a little bit, with the market and different generations. But there's a real demand out there still in Georgia, especially because we're still pretty far behind the 8 ball. And, we're growing still. That's the difference in Georgia. We're still in a growth phase. So it's really important for them because they're going to have that access. They're going to have, and that also drives quality. The more successful small breweries are that are making this great beer, the more successful they can to continue to invest in their product and their, and their employees and their facilities and their equipment. One of the largest things that breweries actually nationwide have invested in when these sort of laws change is equipment. Because then they're able to scale up production and improve their quality as well.
It encourages you to put out some of these smaller releases that you might not get outside of your tap room.
That's right.
Like if you have a limited area of self-distribution, your local the area bars could also have it on tap, so you don't just have to go to the tap room like these other businesses will benefit from it. They have a greater supply of smaller releases theoretically, and if they don't want them, it's no big deal. So it just options are a good thing here, is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. And Tim, you asked what can people specifically do? How can they respond and act? There's a couple ways right now. Right now, we've got a petition that's been circulating, and it's really important for us because it does show the strength in numbers that we have. Our asset, our greatest asset, is our very devoted, loyal consumer and customer base. Right? We know that we have that in Georgia. We need to get those folks activated. So we've had a petition for a couple months. It's going to run through the legislative session. We're trying to get at least 10,000 signatures. Now, what those signatures do is, yes, they show that we have 10,000 folks who are behind our small breweries in Georgia. But then that also, we're taking that data in, those names and those email addresses, and we're going to be able to turn that around and actually activate those folks to send the emails to their legislators during the legislative session, which is the most powerful part of collecting that data. That it's 10,000 emails flooding the state capitol of folks that, can say, we want this access, we want this change. This is good for not only these small businesses, but for the consumer as well. And there'll be other opportunities coming in the next few weeks, the next couple of months, to activate those folks and others who want to advocate for their local breweries and actually engage in the legislative process, whether that's through phone calls, emails, coming to the Capitol, but a lot of it's probably going to be, from the comfort of your own home, to make a phone call or click a link to support our cause and our efforts here.
And Joseph, I'm just going to say, for those that have been around in Georgia long enough to remember fighting for SB 63 and SB 85, the community was very involved in the grassroots efforts. And y'all, it works. It makes a difference. People noticed it. People knew about it. People heard about it. And at that time when we were pushing those bills, people didn't know about the way the laws were here. They were surprised that a brewery couldn't sell their own beer. And a lot of people who did not know that, their immediate response is, what? That's crazy. How come you can't sell your own product? So it's important really to get the word out there and bring awareness for it. And, we saw, again, talking about these former beer bills, in 2018, Brian and I visited every brewery in the state of Georgia. I think it was 85 is what we hit. We're like double that. Where are we at now, Joseph? What's our brewery count in Georgia?
It's a moving target.
It is.
The last
160-ish?
It's probably a little bit more than that now because we've had several more open. I'd say it's north of 170 to 180.
So we're looking in a 5-year time frame, we've doubled the number of breweries here in Georgia. And that is 100%, okay, maybe not 100%, 95% because of these changes to the laws that allowed some people to do things. We saw our friends Matt and Lauren Curlin just a little bit earlier. Variant Brewing in Roswell, Georgia, which is an insanely popular brewery making some fantastic beers. The bulk of what they do is in their tap room because they can do that.
That's right.
That's something that you couldn't do in 2016 Georgia. So way back in the olden days, before the plague, Joseph.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, and places like Halfway Crooks just wouldn't exist in the way they currently operate. You just couldn't do it. Like there's a lot of stuff like that. That's just their entire model is only possible because we got a little bit more reasonable with our laws. And how much more could it grow if we got even more reasonable with our laws?
Mm-hmm. And watching the conversations around this, one of the big complaints that I see from people is this isn't enough. This isn't necessary. This is too much. This is it. I will tell you this, Joseph. Before I got involved in following these beer bills and helping, Nancy Palmer, that was your predecessor with the Guild, worked a lot with Nancy on spreading the word. Fighting to change laws is crazy. I don't know any other way to put it. It's crazy, and there's a lot of negotiation. There's a lot of small victories, a piece at a time. And back in 2016, there were comments made from others that it's like if you give someone an inch, they want to take a mile. There was fear of that. Ask JR that owns Bold Monk. We're holding this festival. JR's been in the Georgia beer scene for going on 30 years, probably.
Yeah.
Crawford Moran, who's recently closed his breweries. These guys were fighting when ABV was 6%. ABV cap was 6%. We had someone just stop by our booth a little bit earlier and said they just relocated here from Texas. And they're like, hey, this ABV cap, we love high ABV beers. where do we go? And these, if they'd been here 15 years ago, it was a 6% cap. So small changes. We can buy beer on Sunday here now. We can have a beer over 6%. We can go to a brewery and buy a beer. We can go to a brewery and get a sandwich with our beer. So changes are happening, y'all. And we're not going to get everything right out of the gate, but go after what you can, negotiate. It's the art of negotiation here, because there are other parties that have interest in this. There are the retailers, there are the wholesalers that aren't just the breweries. And if it was just the brewers in here, we just change it all to favor the brewers.
Yeah.
But we're trying to make something here that I take ownership of this, man.
Yeah,
I'm a Georgia beer drinker. I get right in it, Joseph.
Yeah.
So, but they're trying to change this now in a way that helps people without hurting others. It's not looking to hurt anybody, just want to, ease some restrictions and make things a little more fair. So, right,
I agree.
Joseph?
Well
I'm
said.
speaking here, but I believe that's the core of it.
Rah,
there.
rah.
I've
man.
always
So-
thought that the laws here were just nuts. From the
Yeah.
first day I moved here, I'm like, are you serious about all this
Right.
stuff? Yeah.
Joseph, what's your socials and website and all that for the Guild? Where should people go check you out?
On Instagram, I believe I'm getting this right. It's at GA Craft Brewers Guild. And if you put in the search Georgia Craft Brewers
You'll
Guild
find
in any of these, you'll find us really quickly.
Okay, good deal.
Same with Facebook. I'm not sure about the handle, but put us in the search. You'll find us. We've got Georgia Beer Day coming up on
That's right.
March 9th, and it's a great day to support your local breweries and also support the Guild. You get two birds with one stone.
And you get a cool glass.
Is there
we
new
always
glass?
have a cool glass.
You get a great glass.
A great
See?
glass.
A great
Okay.
glass,
Great
and it's a
glass.
great design. And it, without tying in too much, it doesn't tie into the politics of beer right now, but it ties into this idea of supporting your local brewery in a time that has been tough the past couple of years. There's no doubt. So it really is all about supporting local, supporting your craft breweries.
Very cool. Joseph, we're here at ACAT. What's been some of your favorites today?
Ooh, you're trying to get me in trouble.
I am. I got to call
It's
them
like
out,
asking the
make
parents
choice.
who they're.
Who's your favorite child?
That's right. You know what? I would defer to a lot of folks who, frankly, also know way more about beer than I do about what the favorites are. But my favorite thing about festivals like this is you really get to showcase and highlight the quality beer that Georgia's putting out. And I've had several that I love today. Several of our guild members. There are a couple out-of-state ones that came in hot,
Yes,
that had some
yeah,
great
for
beers.
sure.
I can say that because, I tasted a tasty magnanimous a beer and a couple others. But I love if people can come to these sort of events in Georgia and see how far we've come in terms of brewing just really great quality beer. That's what I love.
I say this with all seriousness, and y'all, I'm on medication. I'll just say that. I'm on medication. I messed up my toe, and I got to take antibiotics, so the doctor told me to chill. Well, now he's like, all right. He's like, just don't drink a lot. So I've been selective today, but I will say that every single beer that I've tried, I've enjoyed today.
Great.
And that's included beers from Monday Night Brewing, Stillfire Brewing, from Lost Druid. They have been very good, all of them that I've tried. I'm trying to remember some of the other ones. I've only had
Three
4 or
Taverns.
5. 3 Taverns,
Yep.
another good one.
That
But
New Realm one was really good too.
New
Yeah.
Realm, that's right. So that's it. Everything I've tried has been really good. So definitely appreciate it. Joseph, thanks so much for
Thank
for
you, guys.
what you do for Georgia Beer, for hanging out with us. We really appreciate it. Y'all, before we go, we got to thank our sponsors of Beer Guys Radio. We can do this because of them. Our friends, as we were talking about earlier, Terrapin Brewery Atlanta. Go down there, check them out. Head to the park, get some barbecue, get a beer, have a good time with it. They're going to make you feel welcome. They're going to give you some good beer. It is freezing cold, literally, in Atlanta.
It is below
this
freezing
weekend.
right
It's
now.
freezing cold here, so it's a perfect time to get you a stout. Maybe get you some of those chili cheese fries that they've got,
Yeah,
Frito chili pie. But thank you so much to Terrapin Brewery Atlanta for sponsoring Beer Guys Radio.
And you know what? Every week we talk about what we would be doing at Truck and Tap instead of doing the show that night. And, sometimes it's drinking the big old warming stouts and the bourbon flights and, playing Truck and Tap roulette like I like to. Well, the time for talk is nearly over. Next week we'll be at Truck and Tap Duluth recording a show about hot drinks and cold weather. Have you ever had a beer that was like about 40 degrees and said, hey, this is fine, but what if this beer was 140 degrees? Well, the good news, we'll be talking about that. We'll be experimenting with it. We'll be getting into mulled beers, Blue Creeks, hot poke beers, hot toddies, and more. It's going to be a great time, and you should join us there. You'll have a chance to try all these hot concoctions for yourself. So thank you, Truck and Tap, for your support. We will see you there next week.
Your little tongue tie almost got dirty over there,
I know
Brian,
it did.
so,
you know, and I got so excited about this next show that's coming up. I prematurely hot poked an IPA last night.
Did you? How'd it go for you?
You know what? It was an older IPA, so it was fading. It kind of revived
woke
it a little
up
bit.
A little bit.
Yeah,
Good
it
stuff,
woke it
man.
up a little bit.
That's going to be a fun event. We're
Yeah.
looking forward to going over there and hanging out. Well, y'all, thank you so much for tuning in with us to talk about Cask Ale beer laws. We try and follow that the most we can. We love keeping up with what's going on everywhere and following their fight, especially when it's in your backyard, man. We definitely try and watch it. But, y'all, thank you so much. We hope you're having a good week. Have a good week. And don't forget to drink local. Cheers.